Welcome to this lesson on using Fusion 360 to design a lure. When you're using Fusion 360, the first thing you want to do is create a new component. Components are containers for geometry. I'm going to make a new component and call it lure. I do want it to be activated, and I'll push OK. Immediately after creating a new component, I'll save the design, and I'll call it first jig. Doesn't really matter what you call it. Now let's go to our document units and edit those. In this case, I want to use inches, and I'll push OK. Notice that the lure component is still activated. I could activate the top level, but I want to keep the lure activated. Now I'll create a new sketch by pushing the new sketch button. 3 planes appear, and I can select one by hovering over it. In this case, I actually want to click on the right plane, which is the YZ plane. Next, I'll push the Look At button. The Look At button allows me to view the plane orthogonally. Now I'll zoom and pan so that I can get the sketch plane exactly where I want it. And next we'll use the line tool. I'll create a vertical line starting at the origin and hit the green check, and then I'll create a horizontal line starting at the origin. Next I'll choose the 3-point arc tool, and I'll create the starting point of the arc, the ending point, and then pull up the middle. So that's start, end, middle. And for the last one, I'll use the end point of the horizontal line. Now we've got our basic geometry, but I need to dimension it with the dimension tool here. You can just click on a line and pull the dimension out and then type the number you want. Now notice that we have 2 black lines and 3 blue arcs. The blue arcs are not fully defined. The black lines are. To fully define this, I'll click on one point and the second point and create a horizontal dimension. I'll also create a radius for that arc by clicking on the arc, and then finally I'll click on this horizontal line and this point here and create the vertical distance. And notice that that arc is now black, meaning it's fully defined. I'll do the same steps for the second arc. Notice that I could create a diagonal dimension, but I want this to be horizontal. I'll define the radius, and then last define the height here for this endpoint, and that second arc is now black. For the third arc, I only need to define its radius, and now the sketch is fully defined. All the geometry is black. We can also tell it's fully defined by opening the browser here and expanding the sketch, and you'll see there's a red lock. If I were to delete one of these dimensions, like this arc radius, you'll notice that that red lock changes to a pencil, meaning it's not fully defined. But I'll undo that. Now when we're finished with the sketch, we hit the green Finish Sketch button. And now I'll push the home here on the view cube to go to the isometric view. Next, I want to revolve this sketch. It's already pre-selected. In case it hasn't, you could just click on the sketch area to select it. Now we want to pick the axis. Now there's a couple of sketch entities here, and I can use Fusion's Select Through function by holding the left mouse button and then releasing it when I see this little menu. And I can either pick a sketch line or the y-axis. I want the y-axis. Then I'll push OK to finish that revolve. Now we have the body of the jig. Next, I want to create a new sketch on the bottom or XY plane. I'm once again going to look at the sketch plane, and I'll pan it up because I'm going to create the claws at the end of this jig. The first thing I want to do here is project some things. We can use project to project either sketch entities or 3D geometry onto our sketch plane. So I'll use this circular feature and the tip of the body. I can push the slice to cut the view in half. This doesn't actually change the geometry, but just makes it so I can see it a little bit easier. And then I'll rotate the view cube. Now I'm going to start by creating an arc, a couple of arcs actually. This is the same 3-point arc that I used earlier. This will be the outside of the claw. Then I want to use the line tool to create the inside of the claw. Since we'll be using dimensions and constraints in a little bit, the exact geometry doesn't really matter at this point. I'll create a circle here as well to just kind of hold a little hole. Now before I just start dimensioning, I'm actually going to use some sketch constraints. So I'll click this point in this line and push coincident so the two are aligned. I'll do the same thing with this point and the edge of the circle. I want to make the center point of this arc coincident with this line as well. And then I'll make these two arcs tangent to each other. I want the endpoint of this arc to be coincident with this line as well. And I want the tip and this line to be coincident. And now I can start to dimension it without things moving around too much. Here I like to start with dimensioning the arcs first. Then I'll dimension this circle here. And then I'll dimension the vertical distance between these two lines. Now you'll notice I can dimension the angle of a line by clicking on two lines that are not parallel or perpendicular. And then I need to start doing some horizontal distances. So I can use my left click and hold to select through and pick any sketch point or line, even if they're on top of each other. You'll notice here that the list of sketch entities is longer because the tip here has a lot more points. So make sure you pick the right one. And then the last dimensional here will be the end of the claw. And now the sketch is fully defined. Now this claw is symmetric. So instead of drawing this twice, I'm going to use the Mirror Sketch Entities tool. I can select the two arcs and the three lines as the things I want to mirror, and then I'll use this sketch line over here to mirror it around. And you can see it's still fully defined because the thing I used before the mirror was fully defined. I'll return to isometric view and then use the extrude tool this time to extrude the two claws. I'm going to select both pieces of the sketch and I want them to be symmetrical, and I'm going to define the total distance here as 0.1 inch. Now I'm going to have to change this to a join function rather than a cut. If you leave it as cut, it'll subtract the geometry. Here I want to join, so I create the claws. And now we should have the basic idea. In order to make this a little easier to view, I'm going to click these two eye icons next to the sketches to turn them off. Next, I'll create a new sketch on the bottom plane, the XY, and I'll look at that. I could have used the other sketch plane that I made for the claws. This is going to be for the eyes, but I think it's easier here. I'll project this line again, and then I'll slice it. Now I'll create 2 circles here for the 2 eyes. And I want them both to be about in the same place. So I'll select the 2 center points and use the horizontal constraint. I'll also move the dimension tool by pushing the D key. And here I'll define the diameter of this circle. And when I do the second one, I can just click on the first diameter. I'll copy the dimension over. I'll set the distance between the 2 of them, and then the vertical distance between them and the line I projected earlier. Now, since I want them to be centered, I can use the symmetry constraint. I'll click on one circle, then the second circle, and then I can come over to the browser and expand the origin. And even though I can't see the y-axis, I can use that. And you can see there it's made them symmetrical and it's fully defined. Everything's black. So I'll finish the sketch and we'll use the extrude tool again. Shortcut E for extrude. Make sure to select the actual sketch when you're doing this and not a face. 0.33 is going to be the distance here, and I'll want to change that cut to join. We can look at the isometric view to see what it's doing. And I'll shut off this sketch too. After a quick save, now it's time for the fillet tool. This will just add some curves on some of these sharp edges. So we'll start with the top edge of the 2 eyes. You can see what that does there. Now I could make a new fillet, or I could just continue working in this fillet. I'll select the 2 faces here of the claws. And I can set a new radius for that by just creating new lines in the fillet tool here. So I can do all 3 of these fillets in the one command. Also do the back of the body. There you have it. This is what your finished jig should look like.